Hello.
Just tap on it. Just tap the screen. See how the mic comes up in the bottom corner? Press the mic. It'll
Just give it a few more minutes, and then once it hits around just 12:30, I'll get started. And you guys can hear me okay? Cool.
Hi,
Hi.
wake
Good to
up.
see you, Shona.
Yeah, good to see you.
That's good. How have you been? Recovered from
From Sony Scope. Yes, yes, you.
kind of, kind of. I pretty much went straight into it
Yeah,
back again.
non-stop pain.
Yeah. Why is it making weird noises? Hold on. Let me try again. I'm just gonna wait for a few more people to join in.
No worries.
There you go. Everyone's joining in. There's more people now, which is good. I'm just gonna make sure people are checked in as well. So while we wait, I will check people in so everyone gets their entry or a chance to win a trip to Rome. Good luck, everyone. Hopefully one of you wins. It's always good when you get to win a free trip. So who's here? I've got Shona. Nina. Hey Nina, it's good to see you too. Stephanie. So it's not in order, so I'm trying to figure out where everyone is. Who else is here? Jean, Caleb, Belinda. Trying to find your name. Trying to find everyone's name. Go. Hayden is here. I'm just checking everyone in before I start so I can get at least everyone in there. Stephanie, and then David. David. Okay, I think I've checked everyone in, I believe. Done. I'm just going to take, oh, and Sharon's already. See you there, Sharon. I'm going to check you in too. Just going to take a screenshot so that just in case I've missed anyone. All right. Well, let's get started. Let me find my screen that I need to share. Okay. Share my Zoom thing. So that's all right. Awesome. So before we get started, I would love to know, where is everyone joining from? Either unmute or go yeah, in the chat. Let me know, where are you joining from? Awesome. So New South Wales, New Zealand. Oh, New Zealand. Thanks for coming. New Zealand. Yeah. Sydney, Gold Coast, Cairns, Brisbane, Christchurch. Amazing. Lots of people joining from everywhere. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm going to now, let's go share my screen. And hopefully you can see my screen. Nope, not yet. Wrong one. There you go. You can see that now. The 7 dogs on the screen. Yes. Yep. Awesome. Perfect. So, all right. Well, thank you for coming today and spending your lunchtime with me. So today we're going to cover, it's mainly introduction. So for those of you who have attended my other webinars on editing, this might kind of go back to basics a bit, but it might still be useful. But let me introduce myself first. My name is Ina, and I run a pet photography business based in Canberra called Ina J Photography. I am a full-time pet photographer, and I do specialize just in pet photographer, mainly photographing dogs outdoors, but I do have a home studio, and I also photograph other pets. And I also run workshops to teach others pet photography and also mentor and coach other pet photographers to grow their business. So I do a few different things. I started with mainly pet photography, but now I'm also expanding to yeah, helping others and teaching others, growing their business and expanding to pet photography. This is my family. My little 3 dogs are Rosie, James, and Pippa. They're my little muse, my inspiration, my staff as well, although they don't do much other than just sit and pose for treats. But that's always helpful at times. When it comes to modeling, yeah, getting photos and testing some things in the studio, they're pretty good. In outdoors, they're a bit not as good. But yeah, it's lots of fun having them around. All right. So today what I'm going to cover is some gears, some basic settings and tips for pet photography, and I'll talk through about how I edit, but I probably won't have time to actually go through the whole editing process. I had run some webinars last couple of weeks in terms of how I edit in Lightroom and Photoshop. If you didn't attend those and miss those sessions, and if you are interested in it, I might run some more next month, October, which is coming up. And that way you can join me in those sessions to learn more about my editing process in Lightroom and Photoshop. So what's in my bag? So my gears have accumulated over the last few years. When I first started, I started with the Sony A7 III, and I had only the 85mm lens, Sony 85mm lens, and the Tamron 28-75. Now I'm a Sony advocate. I can't use Tamron, so I have to stick with the Sony lenses. And the Sony GM lenses are really good. They're probably the best. And since, moving and expanding my gear, these are the lenses that I have. So I use the Sony A1 Mark II body, and the lenses I use are 135mm 1.8, 35mm 1.4, 85mm 2870, and 70 to 200. Now, I don't use all of these lenses all the time. Pretty much the two lenses that I currently bring to every sessions are these two here, the 135mm and the 28 to 70. And the majority of the time, probably like 75% of the time, I am photographing just with 135mm. Now that might change soon because I do want to test out the 50 to 150, 50 to 150 f2, which, it's not f4.8, but it's very close. So who knows, that might replace this lens when I give it a go. So I'm going to try and see if I can borrow it and have a play with it and test out the difference. Who here uses Sony currently? So if you put in the chat, how many of you use a Sony? And if so, which body are you using? A6700, A7R5, that's great. What else? A7 III, A7C, that's great. So there's a few Sony. Are there anyone here who's not using mirrorless at the moment? So there anyone here still using an SLR or other cameras? No.
I'm using a DSLR,
Which one are you using?
a Nikon D780.
Oh, nice. I used to have the D750.
Nice.
Yeah. So definitely I found since changing to the mirrorless, the eye autofocus is game changing.
Yep.
So that's probably one of the features I love about
Yeah.
this. When I did when I started pet photography, I did use a D750 for a while, and I found that there was a lot of, especially action shots, a lot of missed focus.
Oh,
Yeah, it's definitely much more challenging, but with the eye autofocus, it's awesome. But yeah, these are my gears. I know a lot of pet photographers tend to use the 70 to 200 a lot more, but this has been sitting on my shelf, so I'm probably going to eventually sell it and see if I can get the 50 to 150 f2, because I just find the f2.8 is not wide enough. And if you guys are already following me or have seen my work, you probably can see in my style that I shoot open wide because I love that beautiful creamy background blur. All right, so we're gonna get into it. Tips for photographing dogs. Basically, there's probably a lot of things to cover, but the four major tips are finding good light source and have that dog facing the light source, especially when you're starting out. Once you get a bit more advanced and you're more confident and knowing where the light hits and things like that, you can then start playing around with different positioning, like backlights and things like that. Timing of the shoot is really important because I also I mainly photograph during an hour before sunset because that's when the light's really soft. But there are times where I've had to photograph during the day, like I'm going to do that this Sunday, as I'm doing a limited mini session at the snow. So in those situations, I would usually try to find an area where there's a lot of shades, there's not as much harsh sunlight. But yeah, it's really important having that good timing. Second thing is always get low and try to get as low as you can, especially for little dogs, because we want to make sure that we capture them at their eye level or lower. So when we're photographing on our phone usually, and I know if we're taking snapshots, everyday snapshots, we're always looking down at the dog. So holding the phone, looking down at the dog. So a lot of the times you'll just get, the floor or the ground. as the background. When you get low, you change that perspective and you get more of the background and create a different context for the photo. So it's always important to try and get low. And if you think you're not low enough, just get lower. If you see more of the 50%, at least 50% of the ground, you need to still get lower. And then composition. So once you're comfortable in, getting the shot, getting the technique sorted, the settings, composition is important. Making sure there's enough space around the dog. Also, when you're doing action shot, making sure there's enough space for the dog to run into, creating different composition to, I guess, create focus on the dog using leading lines, negative space, and things like that is really important. And then the fourth thing is getting their attention. Now, who here has photographed dogs before, or you've done some dog photography, or at least photograph your dogs? Let me see the chat. Sorry, I'm using my other computer. Yep. You've tried? Yep. What are the most challenging things that you find when you photograph dogs? I'm guessing it's getting their attention. Is that right?
When I was photographing a dog, it kept running at the lens and trying to distract.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well, Belinda.
I'm sorry, I might be going into the dark, so I'm just.
That's all right. Yeah, getting them to sit still. Yep, getting their attention.
Yes, it ran and licked the lens and tried to get.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. And moving a lot, of course, and doesn't look at you or the camera directly. Now, I've got a few tips to get their attention. If you ever come with me to a photo shoot, you'll hear me making some weird noises. And I'll also be carrying some like weird different noisemakers around my neck. So I've gotten some like hunting collars and things like that and squeakers. So it depends on the dog. I usually try to get to know them in terms of like understanding them from their owner's perspectives, what they like, whether they respond to treats or toys or noises and things like that. And so once you get that understanding about what can trigger them and what can get their attention, you can use the different things. So some you might require treats to get their attention. Some dogs you might have to make some weird noises or use a squeaker, or use like, treat bag, like shaking the treat bag. Or some dogs like having toys or a ball or frisbee to get their attention. So different pets will have different ways that you can do to get their attention. But basically, yeah, trying to get their attention is really key, because having them looking in the camera is really nice to catch those expressions. Now, not all the photos that I take require them to look in the camera. Sometimes I actually do like them to look away or look towards the owner, and to capture just candid moments as well. But I do like to make sure at least, I have some photos where they look straight into the camera so you can really create that connection with the dogs. No, we're going to more technical stuff at the moment, which is the settings. So as you probably know, to get good exposure, there are 3 elements: ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So I will go through into each of them. So shutter speed is basically how fast the lens opens up. So the slower the shutter, there's going to be more motion blur. And so the lower numbers means that it's slow shutter, the high numbers is fast shutter. And you can see in this diagram here, the slower the shutter, you'll get more motion blur because it opens up, opens and closes slowly. And so by the time it captures the photo, the dog might have moved from the initial position. So generally, photographing dogs, we need to freeze the motions, and we tend to go at a faster shutter speed. So I'll go back here. The general tip that I use is I would stick for portraits 1/500th of a second. That's if the dog can, sit or stand drop, stay. They don't need to sit or stay for very long. You just need like a few seconds, and 1/500th of a second would capture that. If you're doing an action shot, so that's them running, moving, playing, I would recommend sticking to 1/1250. So just slightly one stop slower than this. 1/1250 will freeze that motion, and that's great for running shots, playing shots and things like that. And you, by doing that, at least you can make sure that you freeze the motion. You can go faster. Faster makes it even easier, but obviously you want to compensate that if you don't have enough light. If you have a faster shutter speed, you have to open wide your aperture, and then you have to also increase your ISO. So you can see here, this is an attempt that I did at 1/25th of a second, which is quite a slow shutter speed. And usually even handheld, like 1/60th is probably the slowest that you can go at handheld. Below that, you would need a tripod. I didn't bring a tripod with me at this time, and I was in the water, and I tried to lean against a rock for this, but you can see that there is still movement blur because the dog's not going to be able to stay still the entire time. There's going to be some tiny movements. This is at 1/250, so it's faster, and you can see it's not too bad, but you can see there is a little bit of blur still in there. And then this is on the upper end, 1/250, when we're doing some action shots. So this dog was running towards me, and I was shooting quite a lot in high burst as well. So that was really helpful. Obviously, some of the photos weren't in focus, but because I shoot in high burst for action, I managed to get this really awesome photo of Merlin in the air. And then another action shot jumping over a stick, a log. So again, this is a very cute corgi jumping up, and he was quite fast as well. And with running shots and action shots, you really need to be fast. So I would recommend, if you can go 1/1/50 or higher, that's the ideal setting for action shots. All right. Then the next part of the exposure is, once you make sure you've set your shutter speed 1/500 for a portrait, or 1/250 for action, then you can then adjust your aperture. Now, I recommend opening up the aperture to like the widest you can do. So the smaller the number is, the wider the aperture. You've got shallow aperture when you've got a higher f number. My lens, as I said, I use 135mm 1.8 a lot. So I'm in the very open wide, and that way it allows me to shoot with that beautiful creamy bokeh blur in the background. So you can see here, wider aperture means you've got more background blur. You've got a better separation of the subject with the background. Now, the background blur can also work by where you place the dog compared to the background as well. So for example, if you've got a bush here and you place the dog like literally right in front, even if you shoot at 1.8, there's still, the background blur won't be that significant. But if you place the dog much further away from a bit further away from the bush, and then shoot wide open as well, you'll get more with the background blur. And then the focal length also come in place. So there's like different aspects to get that beautiful creamy blur. You've got the focal length, the placement of the where the background is, sorry, where the subject is compared to the background, and then the aperture. But generally, the higher the aperture, well, the higher the f number, the sharper everything will be. So these are some examples of photos I've taken. This was using the 50mm f1.2, which I was testing out, and this was shot at f1.2. So you can see the depth of field is very, very shallow here. I did focus on the eyes, and you can see basically the area in that same focal range is in focus, but everything else is very creamy and blurry. This one is at f1.4, I think 85mm. So you can see again the foreground blur and the background blur, but the dog's eyes are focused. This is at 1.8, capturing it from a different perspective. I wanted to capture it through the leaves from the top. Again, you can see pretty much all the background are blurry, and what's in focus is in the eyes and around there, which is where I focused. Another one at f1.8. Then I wanted to show you some photos that I've taken at the shallow aperture. And the reason why I've taken this at shallow aperture is because I have used off-camera flash in here. So you can probably see this catch light in the eye. That's a softbox there. So this is at f7.1. So you can see the background is slightly blurry, but it's not as creamy like the previous one here. And again, f8. Because I placed it quite far from the background, you can still get that background blur, but pretty much the dog, the eyes, and the nose, they're all in focus. And then this was f20. And the reason why I went f20 for this one is to get that sun star. Usually for the sun star, you want to try and capture f20 or f22. And again, I had to use off-camera flash to make sure that I can get the exposure correctly. So I had it off-camera flash right next to me as well. And then I think that's it for this one. There you go. Once you've adjusted the shutter speed and aperture, then you can then adjust the ISO accordingly. Now I always look at the histogram on the camera. If you have, does anyone here understand how the histogram work? Like I think a lot of you probably would know how the histogram work. Yep, awesome. Yeah, and I tend to underexpose like by 1 or 2 stop, because by underexposing, I can always bring back the details in the dark later. But if I overexpose and clip the whites, the bright part, it's going to be hard to bring back details. So you can adjust your exposure and adjust your ISO accordingly. So generally, I just start with the shutter speed and aperture, and then I'll change the ISO. And don't be afraid to go higher ISO with camera these days. It's pretty good with noise sensitivity, and you can always use Lightroom denoise or Topaz denoise to reduce the noise in the photo if you had to shoot at high ISO. And then, yeah, the next thing is lighting. So lighting is everything because it sets the mood, feel, and texture of your photograph. And understanding where the light is falling and how that will affect your subject is really important. So as I mentioned, I usually shoot at golden hour. So usually an hour before sunset, because that's when you get that soft, beautiful light and it's diffused. If you're shooting earlier in the day, you're going to get harsher sunlight. So this one here, I was shooting very, very close to like sunset, and I think like it was close to dusk. The sun's kind of come down. You can see the colors of the sky changing, but you can see that there's the sun is setting over this way. You can see the rim light here on the back coat of this dog, as well as this one here. This one here, I did shoot at an hour before sunset, but the sun was still quite high up, and the sun was coming from the right, so you can see how the sun's hitting him. I did use a backlight, so I made sure that I didn't fully place him in the full sun and placed him in the shady spot, and then I could always adjust the exposure in Photoshop after. This one here was taken during early in the day, but it was in the Blue Mountains and within the, with all the waterfalls and hills. So there was a lot of shade and there wasn't actually much light. So I could have actually gone heaps earlier. I think I went around 3 o'clock, and that was in August. So sunset would have been around 5. So I could have actually gone even earlier at 1 or 2, because there's so much, it's so far down that there's so much shade down there that there wasn't that much light. So I had to really bring this up high. It was a very hard hike, that one. And then this one here was very early in the morning, or not very early, but 8 a.m. in the morning. So you can see there's still quite a strong light. You can see the background there, and I had to use off-camera flash here to actually offset the very bright, harsh sun. So in this shot here, I would have exposed for the background and then used the flash to fill in the dog. As I mentioned, don't be afraid of low light and increase your ISO if you have to. As you can see in the raw files here, the photo, this is the raw photo straight out of camera. The key thing as well, I always shoot in raw. That way, because you can always change the details later. If you shoot in JPEG, you're going to lose details every time you edit it. So taking the photos in raw will help you to then adjust the exposure, white balance. You can change as much as you can later in editing, but JPEG is a bit more limited. So you can see here, this is very bright background. So I had to underexpose, because if I had exposed for the dog instead of the background, that light is going to be extremely clipped and you're going to lose details in the sky. And that was the reason why I underexposed there. But during editing process, you can see I brought up all the details in the dog. I warmed it up as well, so it's not as blue as the original photo. That's the same with this one on the right. This was in the morning. Again, this bright sky here, if I had exposed for the dog, which is it has got a lot of black, that would have been way, way, way too overexposed. So I did have to underexpose by quite a bit, and it does look quite dark, but I was able to bring up the details here. Again, black dogs, especially shooting black dogs, you try to want to expose to the black dogs, but you got to make sure that you don't overexpose the background as well. This is not too bad because the background wasn't as bright, but if I did expose even higher for the background, it's going to just go a bit too bright in the background. It'll be harder to bring the details. So that's why I always make sure I underexpose by a couple of stops. Any questions so far? I hope it's been useful. All good? Yep. Okay, cool. So yes, as I mentioned, histogram, looking at the histogram is really important. And I've already said it multiple times, it is better to underexpose than overexpose, as it preserves the brighter background detail better. In the histogram, you can see here, like, this is an even balance exposed photo. So you've got a bell curve here. The right part here, it's basically the whites. The left part here is the blacks, and the middle part is basically the mid-tones. So if you see on the very right here that there's a big spike, that means that it's going to indicate there's some kind of whites and bright parts that are clipped or overexposed, and vice versa. If you see a big spike up in the back here, then there's quite the black is way, way, way underexposed. So you want to have an even balance histogram. And you can kind of look at that in your camera as well to get an idea. So now we're moving on to focus. As you've seen in my work, I do shoot open wide, which means that not all the images are in focus. And basically the focus is the sharp parts of the image. And it sounds simple, but poor focus can ruin an otherwise good photo. The focus point is always set within the frame that, you know, it tells where the autofocus system where it needs to focus. Now with the Sony cameras and the mirrorless cameras as well, Canon and Nikon, the great thing is that we have autofocus and they also have eye autofocus. So you can change the different focus point to either wide, narrow, like a zone focus, or single point, where you can then tell the camera this is where you want to look for the dog's eyes or the subject's eyes. So the focus settings that I use are these. Feel free to take a screenshot of this. I usually use continuous autofocus, even for portraits as well. I just leave it on as continuous because it's just easier, because I always move around anyway. And sometimes, they might do a little run, have to quickly change the shutter speed so I can capture the action really quickly. I also use back button focus. So by default, your camera usually focuses when you half press the shutter speed. So when you press the shutter halfway, it's going to focus, and then when you press it fully, then it's going to take the photo. Now, I always change mine to back button focus when I get a new camera, and I use the back button to focus instead of a shutter, and that helps me to recompose later on. It helps me when I'm creating panorama. It helps me when I need to get a clean slate image. So if there's a difficult dogs and the owners can't move far away from the dog, then I usually have to take a clean slate of the background to make sure that the editing is easier rather than me having to recreate the background. That's where the back button focus comes in handy. And then animal eye autofocus is always on, with the eye priority on. And I use zone focus area for action shots, and probably for all types of shots as well. But if I do have specific dogs with like fluffy fur, or when I want more control on where to focus, then I use a small or medium single spot focus. And eye tracking, make sure eye tracking is on. That's probably been the game changer in pet photography. So sometimes though, with the eye autofocus, it can get confused and it focuses on the nose instead. So this is an example where it had focus on the nose instead of the eyes. And as you can see, compared to the next image where I focus on the eyes, it creates a different feeling, and like it just doesn't look as good. You're not connecting with the dog because you're not focusing on the eyes. Whereas this one here, you're really like, as they say, eyes are the windows to the soul. I think you can connect more in this photo when it's, the eyes are in focus. And this is using the flexible zone focus mode. Where do I choose to focus when I've got more than 2 dogs? I will be covering that actually. So one moment and I will cover that. So that I think I've got a section on that. In terms of the drive mode, when I do portraits, I usually do single shot or a low burst for portrait. Oops, missing a T here. Or I use high speed burst for action because I want to capture as many photos as I can so I don't miss the shot for action. And then coming back to composition, one key thing, don't chop anything off. Does anyone know what I mean by that? You can unmute.
Don't chop paws off.
Yep, no missing legs, no missing ears, like even like part of the ears or tails. Try not to chop anything off. You can do like headshots, so you crop at the chest, that's fine. But yeah, make sure that when you're capturing the whole body of the dog, try not to chop anything off. I think I mentioned this again, get low at the dog's eye level or even lower and give space around the dog. So these are some, I guess, examples of different compositions that I've done. This was actually in Iceland. And we got the dog up on this rock. And I climbed up as well. And because the dog was looking up towards the light there rather than looking at the camera, I specifically framed this. And also the way these rocks, can you see how it create that beautiful frame and kind of leading lines to focus on the dog? And then I created quite a bit of space to the right to the top so that it creates space for the dog to look into. If I had, changed this to focus the dog in the center, it would create a different feeling and it probably isn't as impactful. Doesn't also show the context of the area. This is one that I have done a centered shot. I did leave a bit more room, but Canva resolution kind of crops it a bit more. But because the dog was running towards me, I chose a centered shot here. This was in the snow. It was lots of fun. This one here, again, I chose a bit of room to the left for the dog to run into because, this dog was not running fully straight at me, but sideways. Thanks, Anita. Yeah, so I have to make sure that I leave some room to the left. I could probably crop even more here to leave less space on the right of the dog and just create more of the space for the dog to run into as well. Why is it moving? There you go. Again, another one where the dog isn't looking at the camera and she's looking towards the owner to the right here, and so I've left some space, and I wanted to leave some space here because there was this temple structure thing, and it kind of creates this like a Zen dog kind of photo, and the owner loved this photo, and she actually got this printed on her wall. And I thought this was just a very, very cute photo of Missy. Again, another action shot. I'm leaving more space to the right where the dog can run into. And I'm gonna play this thing. This is me behind the scenes from a while ago. As you can see here, I'm using an off-camera flash on the ground and I'm shooting quite down low. I have used a wide angle here and this is the result. But you can see if I move back, oops, how do I? Let me move back. You can see I'm really in an awkward position. I'm getting very low, twisting my body all over the place, which is probably why I'm sore all the time. But that's what I have to do sometimes to get this kind of shot. Again, there's another one behind the scene. This is a wide angle one that I borrowed from Sony. So I got really up close to the dog. Usually I'm a bit further away, but you get this cute, really cute wide angle shots. And this was when the dog accidentally came too close and I got this big weird nose, and it's still pretty sharp though towards the eye, so that was very cute. Yeah, yep, I just wanted to boop the nose. All right, photographing multiple dogs. So Nina, you had this question. Where do you focus when you've got multiple subjects? So say 2 or more dogs. So as you know, I shoot open wide. If you are shooting open wide f1.8 or f2, or even lower than f4, make sure they are all on the same focal plane. Then you can just focus on one dog. Do I use the same camera and lens for most shoots? Yeah, I use the same camera. I don't bring any second body. I use the same, and I pretty much use 135mm 1.8 most of the time, sometimes like throughout the whole session, and then I change to the 28 to 70 rarely when I want to get a few different, I guess, perspectives, so the wider angle. But generally I just use 135mm 1.8 for both action and portraits. So all of those, except for the wide ones, I have used 135mm. Back to multiple dogs. If I'm shooting open wide, they need to be on the same focal plane. You can just focus on one dog. Otherwise, you want to bring up your aperture to f4 or f6.3. So that way, if there's even just a slight variation and they're slightly behind, it will still be in focus. If you're shooting open wide, if they're even just, a few centimeters forward, you're going to have one dog with, blurred eyes and face. So, oh, why is this not working? There should be some photos here. Why is this not working? Let me just load it. Well, there was some photos here. It's just not working. Let me find the photos and see if I can bring it back in. Let me find it. So I'm going to find the photo. Sorry, with all my finder things. Let me. I'm just going to bring up the photos because it's decided. All right, so let's bring this up. Screen. All right, so you can see here, this is 5 dogs. That was quite challenging because I've had to try and get all of them in the shot. This one though was not shot at the one go, but I did get them to sort of, I had three people handling them, so 2 owners and then the dogs. So I had to have them all on leash as well. And then I removed the leash afterwards. But I had to try and get them sort of on the similar focal plane. This one here, I photographed them all at the same time. Again, I tried to shot them at the same focal plane, but you can see this dog here, he's slightly forward. So what I had to do for this was I took the shot focusing on this dog, because this dog is on the same focal plane. He's also in focus. And then I took the same shot without moving. I'm just moving the focal, like the focus point in the camera, but I'm not moving the camera at all. Like I'm not moving at all. And then I'll focus on this dog. And so this dog will be in focus because they're sort of on the same focal plane. And then what I did was in Photoshop, I merged the 2 photos where these 2 dogs are in focus and these 2 dogs are in focus. This one, again, I had to do a little, tweak. I focused one photo because these 3 dogs are on the same focal plane. And then this one here was just slightly behind. I had to make sure I created some focus point on each dog. To be safe, what I usually do is I take the same shot 5 times because there's 5 dogs here, each focusing on the different dogs. It's easier when you only have 2 dogs. Does that answer your question, Nina? Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, here's another photo. So this one here was, again, these 4 dogs were really good. They would just stay there, stay still with no leash. And because I got them to sit on the same focal plane, I only needed to focus on one of them. And this was actually a panorama. So the way I shot this was I shot a photo with them in it, and then I just got them to move out of the way. And I pretty much took several shots. I think I did about 15 or 16 shots, and then I merged it all in Photoshop. And this one here, I had to make sure they're on the same focal plane because it's shot at f1.8. Now this dog here, slightly, the focus is not completely sharp, but it wasn't too bad. I was able to fix it in post-processing. This one here, I had to merge photos. So these 4 dogs were all in the same focus plane, but obviously the people had to stand behind them. So I took the same shot, didn't move. I just focused one on the dogs and one on the people. And then I merged it in Photoshop. Now, one of the things to making sure you get authentic pet portraits and capture those expression and connection is actually getting to know the dog. So this is way, way, way before the camera actually come out. And with my clients, I always talk with the owners to learn about the dog or the pet's personality, quirks, story. As I mentioned earlier, to get their attention. What do they like? Are they food motivated? Are they toy or ball motivated? Are they interested in specific noise? Is there specific words that, they react to? So understanding those really helps me then capture their personality when I then come out for the photo shoot. So, when I come to the session itself, I'm now prepared because I've already gotten to know the dog and I might have met them as well. I do encourage my client to bring them to the consultation appointment where they come to my home studio and I get to meet the dogs. It doesn't necessarily happen all the time. Either way, I still get to know more about the dog through their owners because their owners know more about them. And that way I'm prepared for the session. And also getting to know them, you can then work out make them feel secure and expressive. Some dogs are more timid than others, or they're reactive, or they just get distracted really easily. So then I would suggest, locations that would be much quieter, that has less distractions, that hasn't got many people around. If the dog's comfortable and, example, a client of mine wants the Canberra, Telstra Tower and Corelli in the background. So, well, that's a lake, but the lake is very busy. There's always people walking, running, walking their dog, bikes. If your dog is okay with that, then we can do it. Otherwise, it's just going to be a very, very difficult session, or we might just have to take our time. So location wise, it's really important to know what the dog is comfortable with, and whether, how they react to new situations, to people, to other dogs. And then understanding their triggers. So what makes them anxious or uncomfortable. I like to shoot with 135 mil because, especially with dogs who gets really anxious and scared of things and new people, having a big lens in their face is very scary. With 135 mil, I have to be like quite further back. So that gives me quite a lot of space within the dog, and they tend to be a bit more comfortable. And then learning their language, so specific words, sounds, or just gestures that elicit responses. My dogs, they're right behind me. If I say the word TREATS, I won't say it now because they will expect that if I say it. They know. They know the words TREATS. They know WALK. They know HUNGRY. They know all these different words. I have to spell it out now because if I say it, they're going to react. They haven't reacted yet. So sometimes they know WALK. If I say it with like, do you want to go for a W? Then they go. I'm looking at them to see if they're listening. They're not listening. This will then allow you to anticipate and capture those authentic moments. So you don't have to study animal psychology, but understanding the basic body language and being able to understand body language of dogs is really, really important. For example, panting. Panting can mean signs of stress. Some owners go, oh, I like that, the dog mouth open panting because it's a happy shot. It could be a happy dog, but it could also mean they're in stress. Lip licking, yawning, with the brows looking worried. Those are signs of stress. So you want to make sure, to read those behaviors when you're photographing them. And if I see a dog that starts, feeling a bit anxious or unsure, they start licking their lips or yawning, I just go, let's take a break. Let's let them have a sniff around. Just let them have a bit of relax. And that way, I don't want to force them into anything during the session. And being able to recognize those subtle signals are really, really important. And creating the right environment for them, for their personality to really naturally emerge. Does that make sense? Yep. Awesome. Perfect. So now I'll talk a bit more about how I go through my editing. So the software that I use is Lightroom and Photoshop. I have also been using Imagine AI. It's basically an AI editing software that understands my style based on the images that I previously edited that I submitted into the software. And then it adjusts it in Lightroom. So it works in conjunction with Lightroom. And then with Lightroom, I do a lot of the basic adjustments first in there. That's also where I manage and cull the photos. And then once I've done all the basic adjustments for tones, colors, exposures, contrast, and everything in Lightroom, I would then take it to Photoshop to remove any leashes, distractions, parts of the people, and just finish it off to match my style. I also use the Wacom tablet because I like having that precise, especially when you're doing like leash removals, and you got to use the clone stamp. So you can see, I don't know if you can see it on my camera. I've got it right in front of me, and it actually took me a while to get used to it, maybe a couple of weeks, but now once I've used it, I can't go back to just using a mouse. And then my workflow, as I mentioned, so I cull and do the basic edits in Lightroom, including the white balance, lighting, tones. I do some masking as well in there. And then I'll take it into Photoshop to remove leashes and other distraction and edit the photos to match my style. With the editing tips, make sure to check your color balance. Also, make sure your monitor is calibrated. My monitor is basically, I know that anything I see on my monitor, when I print it, it's going to turn out exactly the same. So I've done a lot of calibration on it to make sure that's the case, because I do a lot of printing for my clients. Check your histogram, make sure your highlights are not blown out, and remove any distracting objects. Any bright things that catches your eye that distracts away from the subject, I usually would remove. And then you can crop at the end to improve composition if required. So cropping, I always leave towards the end. That's it. So I've got, I think, 7 minutes left. I've got a couple of webinars coming up. I think I've got another one of this intro coming up. So this is just a repeat for people who can't make it today. And I think it's going to be in the evening next week. I also have a webinar where I'm going to talk more about the business side of things, how I turn my photography from a side hustle to a six-figure business. That's on the 30th of September at 7:30 p.m. And on the bottom there, I've got a QR code that you can scan for my school community. This is going to be mainly focused around the business side of things, not the photography. So if you are looking to do photography, not even pet photography, but portrait photography as a business, and you want to learn tips on how to grow your business with marketing, pricing, mindset, that school community is there and it's free. And there's my link in there for photographers. If you want to work with me as well, I do mentoring sessions, both for business and photography. And I also do have a 12-week one-on-one coaching for business. Thank you, Jay. I hope you found it really useful. And these are my details. So feel free to connect with me on Instagram, my website, Facebook as well. My email is there. Feel free to contact me, email me. I'm an open book. I like to help other people. So, if you've got a question, don't be afraid to email me or message me, because I'm very open and I really want others to, really improve in their pet photography and also, do pet photography as a business, because yeah, it's a really, really fun job. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now, does anyone have any questions at all? Thank you so much for coming today. It's been really nice, yeah, to be able to share this with everyone. No questions at all? Where am I based? I am based in Canberra, Australia. But I do travel. I do have, if you are in Sydney, I have a workshop for studio dog photography on the 24th of October. I know Shona is coming. So I'm hoping there's a few more people that will come as well. And I'm also going to be in Melbourne on the 25th of October, and I'll be running an outdoor dog photography workshop there on the 25th. So if you're in Sydney or Melbourne, those workshops are on Sony Scene. And also next year in May, I have my pet photography retreat that I'm running again. So I don't know if anyone has been to a pet photography retreat at all. So basically it's going to be 3 days, 3 nights, where we're going to spend time with, like-minded people or pet photographers and pet people that love pets and photographing pets. We'll have shoots organized at sunset and possibly sunrise as well, at least 3. We'll cover things like editing during the day, composition, working to find your style in terms of photography, and then we'll also cover some business tips as well. So basically, this pet photography retreat is going to be like a very immersive pet photography weekend, and we'll all stay in the one accommodation. It was lots of fun this year. We photographed like 10 dogs over the weekend in Bright, and Bright in autumn is stunning. So if you're interested, I would love to see you there, because it's going to be amazing. And Caleb, yes, you would need to invest in a chiropractor. I have to invest in a massage therapist and physio, which I go to regularly, because I am always sore. I get dry needling every 2 weeks. You should see how many needles my therapist put in me every. They're like, okay, you've been really sore. You've been doing a lot of stuff. And I was like, yeah, great. But it's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding. Yeah, if you want to do any workshops, let me know. What would you like to do? Like, feel free to let me know, because then I can always create either webinars or workshops. And I do, as I said, I do travel to interstate. Oh, thanks, Caleb. Yeah, I do travel interstate. So, I usually run workshops in person in Melbourne and Sydney. And those photography workshops are really practical. So that way, not only I get to show you, some settings, but I'm there to help guide you, and you get to create some beautiful photos and add to your portfolio. Because I usually have at least, 1 or 2 dogs at the photo shoot. So yeah, awesome, amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm glad you love the presentation. I would love it if you can leave a good 5-star rating for me. So that way people can find more of me on Sony Scene. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and send me a message. All right, well, have a good day and have a good weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.